last month's minutes. Does anyone have any questions on the minutes or any changes? If not, I'd look for a motion to approve the minutes. Martha, Commissioner Sullivan, and Commissioner Vaughn. And that, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, and that carries. So, and next we have our bills. Is there anything, John?
Sure, Mr. President. A little summary of the bills we had from last month. Largest one we had was a Grand Facade Improvement Grant payment, which is great work being done at 103 2nd Street East. We have some funds for the Block 1 Alta survey, so that should conclude the billings for that. And then some marketing for Minnesota Deed, part of the partnership that we're involved in with that organization, and some legal bills. So I could stand for any questions.
Any questions? And then look for a motion to approve the bills. And second, and all in favor, signal by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, and that carries. Now we'll start with the new business. So we have a resolution 13 for approving a revolving loan fund to Spiral Foods. Eric?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, before the HEDRA board this evening is a proposed resolution that would authorize two loans, a loan of $25,000 each. But to walk you through, in addition to what's in your packet here this evening, and we do have Matt, GM for Spiral Foods here this evening, should you have any questions for the applicant. Spiral Foods, as you may already be aware, as this has been brought before you in concept form, they're proposing an expansion, almost doubling, or actually doubling their square footage, proposing to add 5 full-time employees over a period of, I believe it's 3 years with the expansion. Total project cost of just over $630,000. In terms of the loan and when we're looking in operations and any sort of hits that they may take, they're actually going to stay operational, so they'll keep operating in the space that they're in while they're doing the tenant improvements in the space that they'll be moving into. There would be 3 days of business operation when they would shut everything down to do the formal switchover once that new space is ready. Spiral Foods did conduct a market study in 2018 to assess the viability of a larger co-op grocery store and what the expansion could handle in terms of an overall business model. Analyzed 3 scenarios, including the one that's being proposed this evening that outlines their expansion that they've set forward with. Financials, so you may recall when we brought this to you in, I believe it was February, we were working between Vermillion Bank, the SBA, and the City of Hastings. We brought in MCCD, Metropolitan Consortium of Community Developers. They run our Open to Business program as another potential lending source. They jumped at the idea. They were very thankful and appreciative to Matt for reaching out to them and for getting them involved in this. They've brought forward additional $50,000 in funding. Their loan committee met this morning, in fact, and did approve that loan as will be presented here this evening. So when we're looking at this one in terms of, what are the risk and mitigating factors of those risks should HEDRA choose to approve the loan? When we're looking at this in terms of their balance sheet, we do see it as a credit-worthy business. Looking at the past 4 years of their balance sheet and their financials, projecting forward, they do have a negative net worth that will remain, that does not change. But we do see that as something that is being proactively managed and is not a hindrance to this overall project as proposed. They've got a 5-year lease term with a 5-year extension. Collateral, at this point, we're not proposing collateral for the HEDRA loan. Vermillion Bank will have a first position, SBA will have a second position, MCCD will have a third position, all on inventory and machinery and equipment. It's staff's opinion that should a default occur, there's already 3 people in line for any income that would be generated from grocery inventory, whether it be produce or hard goods, and then the equipment. We don't think there's going to be much value left at a 4th position, so we don't think it's worth taking that additional collateral position. But looking at, it's been in business for almost 40 years here in the city. They've proven this concept. Looking at construction risk, they're using Stocko Speedling. They're certainly a known contractor in this city, A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. Looking at their cash flow and where they're headed in terms of the actual business and their ability to take on the new additional debt, I've outlined that here. I won't go into too much detail. Long story short, based on their projections, on their cash flow projections, based on their increased ability to sell groceries, we feel it's more than comfortable that they could handle the additional debt based on the additional cash flow that they will be receiving from the increase in sales. So in looking at the debt service, year one, they have about 3 times, year two, 2 times, that's when the HEDRA payments would kick in, and then year 3, the idle payments, so that's through the SBA. They've got a 2-year deferment. And what's really crucial here that I wanted to highlight too is that the HEDRA's program, by being interest-free and payment-free for 1 year, really allows the debt service coverage ratio to be workable in years 1 and 2 for Vermillion Bank and the private banks. That the absent our payments not kicking in until later, it might not have been bankable in those first year and a half, but because our payments don't kick in until a little bit later and idles even later after that, this works well. So there you see the outline of the financing package as is proposed. So $25,000 in working capital. The way that HEDRA's program is set up is that's a maximum term of 3 years. That's what staff is proposing, 3 years. There is that year of interest repayment free, so total life is really 4 years. At 3.5%, you may recall you updated your program to be between 3 and 4%. They hit 2 of the bonus markers, if you will, to drop it down to 3.5. And then on the machinery and equipment, maximum loan term based on your program is 10 years. We're proposing the maximum term to kind of spread and reduce that payment. So we see this as a nice assistance on the front end with that working capital before some of the other payments really start to hit in. So HEDRA would get their money back pretty early in this process and then would have that longer machinery and equipment loan. With that, I'm happy to stand for questions. And again, Matt is in the audience for any questions you have for the business.
Commissioner Vaughn?
Thank you. Eric, the only question I would have is, HEDRA doesn't get paid back for the first year, correct?
That's correct.
But I see, was there any concern with Vermillion State Bank is 20 years with a 5-year balloon? If I was the manager of the facility, I'd be worried about on the 6th year or the 5th year that their business model might go out of whack because we don't know what that interest is. And are we concerned about what happens on that Vermillion Bank with us getting paid back because they may have to put all their money to pay off whatever that balloon goes to?
Right, yeah. Mr. President Goldbush, Commissioner
Bruce.
Vaughn, great question. We asked the same question of Vermillion Bank and their loan officer as well as Matt. Hey, what's your plan for that 5-year balloon? It's $180,000 loan, and 5 years is still going to be a significant amount. And the purpose at that point, they would look to refinance that amount. The intention of Spiral Foods is to at some point buy that building. So if I had to use my glass ball, I think they're hoping that by that point they'll have bought the building or will be in process and could kind of massage that into a mortgage on the actual building itself.
Thank you.
And it's pretty standard for banks to have a 5-year reset, just from a rate risk standpoint, so I think it makes sense to do that. So, yeah. Any other questions? With that, we're looking for a motion to approve Resolution 13, approving the working capital for $25,000 and a machinery and equipment loan for $25,000 for Spiral Foods Co-op. Looking for a motion for that approval. Okay, do we have a second? Commissioner, all in favor, signal by saying aye. Aye. And opposed? And that motion carries. Congratulations, Matt. Okay, so. Yep. Okay, next we have on the agenda to approve a 4-month extension, or a couple 4-month extensions for 215 Sibley Street, and then also for 1800 Vermillion Street.
Yeah, thank you, President Goldbush. We'll take these one at a time. As HEDRA may recall, so we put together this Facade Improvement Grant Program as really a pilot program to try and address some needs that we knew were within the downtown and Vermillion Street corridors, to trying to persuade some private investment in those areas. When we put this together, we wanted to see that money being used and not languish if others were interested. Perhaps a flaw in that was then we had applications come forward right away. In these cases, we had 2 in January, and then that 3-month timeline would actually expire tonight. And as we've seen today with the weather, it's not super conducive for a lot of exterior construction work to occur, as well as that compounded with the delays in supply chain that we're all more than aware of. And so for those reasons, we've reached out to those two grant recipients, asking them, what's the status? This one in particular, you might have seen they've already done about half the work. The windows that are being refurbished are actually with the window company currently. They're scheduled to working on them. They did pull them up in the schedule now, knowing that there is some time constraints to this. That's scheduled now for June. So for those reasons, we're looking for HEDRA to approve a extension 4 months to allow this work to continue and the grant to stay eligible.
Any questions for Eric? I was just
I
looking,
guess my only question is, do we want to reevaluate that policy and extend that standard timeline?
Yeah, Commissioner Johnson, great question. That is something that staff would bring forward to as a revision if we did do this program again in 2023. The remainder of the grants that are on your agenda this evening, we have already proposed a 4-month window, and that's written in each of the resolutions to extend that. The thought being that these are now summertime grants, so it shouldn't be as much of a weather considerations, and just in checking with them what they thought was reasonable when they could get the work done. But absolutely.
any other questions? Okay, with that, we're looking for a motion to approve the 4-month extension for 215 Sibley Street.
I'll move to approve that.
Commissioner Sullivan and Commissioner Fox. And the motion, all in favor, signal by saying aye. Aye. And opposed, and that carries. Next, we're looking at the 1800 Vermillion Street.
Thank you, Mr. President. Same process here. This one was approved January 14th. Today would mark that three-month deadlines for 1800 Vermillion Street, Clear Choice Pool and Spa, which is taking over the primary lease on that building. They're going to be replacing those kind of rotten cedar shakes on the front of the building, some of those window work. And so same deal here. They've gotten going. They've got the orders in. They just haven't received the materials yet. But they do believe a 4-month extension would allow them to complete the work.
Okay, any questions? And just for a motion to approve the grant for 1800 Vermillion Street, 4-month extension. And a second. And all in favor, signal by saying aye. Aye. And opposed, and that carries. Number D is Resolution 14, is the grant for 118 2nd Street East.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yep, this one is for 118 2nd Street East, commonly known as the Busted Nut Bar and Grill. This one is one of the first ones that came forward with some actual brickwork in the process. That's something that we were, staff, looking at specifically, and if we were going to do that architectural study that we talked about doing, and then instead did this straight-up grant program. So we were very happy to see this come forward to do a lot of some brick replacement, some tuck pointing, and see those that type of work be proposed. Acme Tuck Pointing and Restoration is the contractor they proposed. They're actually doing some of the work on the confluence right now, so we believe they're more than qualified to do this work. Total project cost comes in at $16,500, so again, would meet the thresholds for the full $5,000 grant with that 1-to-1 match. We've got the outline scope of work there, and happy to answer questions.
Any questions?
I do.
Commissioner Vaughn?
Thank you, Chair. Do these historic buildings have to go through HPC on these upgrades, or is staff signing off on them, saying they're just upgrades?
Commissioner Vaughn, this one, when it's maintenance work, HPC does not need to review this specific project.
Got it. So if it's maintenance, HPC doesn't have to see it?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And just as a clarification that we have our staff reviewer take a look at any requirements for HPC. Some of them can be approved by staff, and some of them would need to go to the board.
Any other questions? For a motion to approve Resolution 14 for 118 2nd Street East.
Motion approved.
Mr. Johnson and Commissioner Horace, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, and that carries. Next one is Resolution 15 for 119 2nd Street.
Thank you, President Goldbush. This one is for the building commonly referred to as the El Mexican Restaurant. They're looking to replace rotted trim around the windows, failing and peeling paint on the entry, not the brick, so that's very specific. So the HPC rules do not allow for unpainted brick to become painted. So not the brick, trim in the doors, replace a broken window above the entry, broken seals on some windows to increase the energy efficiency, and then the awnings, it's hard on the scan picture that they provided, but those individual black awnings would get added to kind of round out the facelift that the project and the building would receive.
Any questions for Eric? Okay. Motion to approve Resolution 15.
I'll move. I'll second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. And opposed? And that carries. So now we're on Resolution 16.
Thank you, Mr.
for-
President.
Okay.
So 2216 Vermillion Street, formerly known as, I believe that was the Trophies Plus building. So there's a large overhead garage around the front currently. There's a new owner for that building. They've proposed really making that more of a commercial frontage, so removing that aged and frankly failing overhead door, putting in new windows, new front door, making that much more of a more standard commercial front onto our Vermillion Street corridor, repairing some of the damaged stucco, painting over some of the blighted paint that they have. And this also would be, as you may recall, it was $50,000 total, $40,000 for downtown, $10,000 for Vermillion Street up until the June meeting, then we were gonna reassess. So this would be the second $5,000 grant for the Vermillion Street corridor. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Any questions? So the Vermillion Street is done then?
At-
At this time?
Yes.
Okay. And motion to approve Resolution 16.
I'll move.
Commissioner Sullivan, and second from Sinclair, and all in favor say aye. Aye. And opposed, and that carries. Resolution 17 for 209 Sibley Street.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this one, the second of the 3 brick projects specifically, so tuck pointing on failed mortar joints, replacement of a handful of missed or failed bricks, and rebuilding of the area outlined there in yellow. So this is an example of where some work was done and it wasn't quite done to the level in which it maybe should have been. And so this is a great opportunity to right a wrong and get this fixed the right way. Ms. Hollenbeck is very excited about this. Outlines the scope of work there. This one's also being proposed by Acme Tuck Pointing. As you'll see, the third one's also Acme. The businesses started talking to one another and found that they got what seems to be a competitive price once they were all looped together. So with that, I'll stand for questions.
Any questions? Okay, so we're looking for a motion to approve Resolution 17 for the 209 Sibley Street.
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Johnson and Commissioner Horst, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that carries. So Resolution 18 for 219 Sibley Street.
Thank you, Mr. President. So here's another building also owned by Ms. Hollenbeck. This would be a second grant for Ms. Hollenbeck, but your program does allow for 1 grant per property, not per property owner, and so that they are eligible for this second request. This one would include tuck pointing of the top 3 feet of the wall, replacement of 150 bricks, and so this is one that when the inspection came through, they were very surprised by the amount of deterioration and just about having to rebuild the back wall when it all came, when they looked at it. Tuck pointing of failed mortar joints, again, Acme being the proposed contractor. Total project cost of $18,500. So this was a great one to catch, and so kudos for the program, because this would be good work to get done. $18,500 is the total project cost for this one. With that, I'll stand for questions.
So, and this one, just because it's, they're replacing brick, but looks like it's painted, would they paint it again, or how does that gonna end up?
Yeah, so on, Mr. President, yeah, when they fix this one, they would come back and either match the paint color they have there or repaint the backside, at which, in speaking with Justin, again, because it's already painted, it's okay to be painted again.
Okay. That sounds good. Motion to approve, or any other questions on this one? Motion to approve Resolution 18 for 219.
So moved.
Commissioner Sullivan, and second. Commissioner Brox, all in favor, say aye. Aye. And opposed, and that carries. So number 19, Resolution 19 for 221 Sibley Street.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this one would be for the building, oh my goodness, it's escaping me right now. Building right on the corner here, kitty corner to the police department, Masonic Block building. And so this one, that building is also under new ownership. We met with them, had a great kind of walk around with that building to see what they've got in mind for it. They're proposing to replace all the windows. This does require HPC approval, so any action tonight would be contingent upon HPC authorization. Proposing to replace all the windows. It's just shy of $141,000 project to do all those repairs. This is one, your grant was set up as a first come, first served basis. The point in which this application came through, there was that just shy of $2,400 remaining that had not yet been applied for. And so that's why you see the reduced amount, even though they obviously more than would have matched a $5,000 grant. That's what was replaced, or what was remaining at that time. Staff did make them aware of that fact. They were understanding, and they were just, any amount of grant money is good grant money. So that's why you see that adjustment to the amount. That'll stand for questions.
Any questions? Okay, so we're looking.
So,
Commissioner Rush.
so Eric, if they didn't do everything and we had a new program next year, they'd be eligible to, if they haven't completed everything, they could come back in and apply?
Commissioner Horsch, so the way we've got it set up currently is any work initiated or completed or paid for would no longer be, not viable, but eligible, thank
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
for this. So
Okay.
by and large, the balance of this work would be
Would
completed
be
by
done?
next year, yeah.
Okay,
But to your point, they could apply next year. Now, if we do a program next year, perhaps HEDRA has something, gives preference to somebody that didn't get one the year prior. It's tough to say what program guidelines might be in future years, but at this point, they could apply.
okay. And we're gonna talk about that in June? Is that conversation gonna happen
Yep,
later? So I won't bring up all my questions about that
That's just
tonight.
fine. Yeah, Commissioner Horsch, so with this one, this would culminate the full $50,000 that HEDRA did budget for this fiscal cycle. And so we would no longer be accepting applications for the remainder of this year unless HEDRA earmark more money for it. Staff isn't requesting that at this time, but that is something we could look at when we start the budgeting process, which is likely around the corner again. That's something we could look at and having ready to go in 2023.
Okay. I'll hold my questions then. It's, my comment just is, it's been very successful, and I think it's achieved, you know, what we were hoping for and more. So, yeah, it's been great, as far as I can tell.
Okay, so we're looking for a motion to approve Resolution 19 for 221 Sibley Street.
Motion to approve.
Second, and all in favor, say aye. Aye. And opposed, that carries. Now, next we're on Resolution 20 for terminating and canceling a land credit sale to Dream One LLC, or
Thank you, Mr. President. Yep, so with this one, so you may be familiar, we had to do something similar with Miller Electric when their project didn't go forward. We've been communicating back and forth with WSI Sportswear, Dream One LLC. Throughout this process, we've kind of helped them. They've worked with 3 different general contractors trying to get a project to pencil out, and unfortunately, they just have not been able to get there, even with the land cost reduction down to that $1 at closing. Unfortunately, the numbers just didn't get there. So at this time, staff is recommending, this, we did approve this back in November. So it's been 6-7 months at this point, well, not 6. And so we're proposing to rescind and terminate that approval. WSI Sportswear never did sign off on the development agreement that HEDRA did approve. I think by and large because they were still trying to see if their project was viable, but certainly time well spent. It would be a really good project. And action this evening on canceling or terminating the current sale would not preclude HEDRA from entering into a new agreement in the future with this company. And this is one we've kind of started, okay, we want to check in with Joel and his team every couple of months, see how things are progressing and if they're still looking to build a new building.
okay. Any questions for Eric? We're looking for a motion to approve Resolution 20, terminating and canceling land credit sale to Dream One LLC.
I'll move.
Martha, or Commissioner Sullivan and Commissioner Sinclair, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, and that carries. Okay.
Mr. President, I'm going to give Eric a much-deserved break here in the next couple of items. He's been quite busy and quite successful with the operations that he's been doing. I also want to give him, let come to your attention with the project that we approved earlier tonight with Spiral Co-op. That could have easily been a project that we could have said, nah, it's not going to work, go away. But Eric really took the time out to work through a lot of different processes here to make something happen. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention, that this is really a job well done on his end to make a viable and a growth for a community facility into the future. So that's great. But moving on to what I have officially tonight, you may look at the termination of an existing purchase and development agreement and go, what are we doing? More of some word changes within the document itself. We're looking specifically at what's now termed the Lake Isabel Flats, which is the 89-unit apartment building which is located on the former UBC site. A couple of things came up as we're putting together the closing documents. Number one, the entity that is going to take ownership of the organization has changed from NJS to Lake Isabel Flats. The entity involved in it, or the individual, still remains Nathan Stencil, so that does not change. Also, we're going to be platting the property. The platting of the property adds some complications to how we're going to record the agreements in succession in transferring the property. All that being said, we went with our legal staff's recommendation, which is to terminate the existing contract and approve a new purchase agreement for Lake Isabel Flats. Now, there is no substantive changes within this agreement. A couple of key items: the contingency date still remains at April 29th, so coming up right around the corner here, and they're working hard towards that, and having a closing by June 9th. So this is a project that is coming around the corner. We continue to have a lot of great conversations and looking forward to construction occurring. So the action tonight is to approve Resolution 2221, which authorizes the termination of the existing purchase and development agreement and approving the new one. And I can stand for any questions.
Any questions for John? Hearing none, look for a motion to, I'm sorry.
John, I don't want to complicate the spelling of this, but there has been some chatter on the council side about the spelling of Lake Isabel. This is not the correct spelling as I understand it. Did the developer choose the name?
The developer chose a name on that, yes. And I know there's, looking at different ways that Lake Isabel has been spelled over the years, I know there's differing sides on that, absolutely. From our standpoint, we just want to make sure that however it is spelled remains consistent throughout the agreements.
Gotcha, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, a motion to approve Resolution 21? Okay. And all in favor, say aye. Aye. And opposed? And that carries. So next, Resolution 2022-22.
All right.
It looks like a
Similar type of item, folks. This is with the Seaward Development, River Cities Investments, the 32-unit building located on 3rd Street. So this is another property that will be platted, or replatted as part of the subdivision necessitating this change. So we would be authorizing termination of the existing purchase and development agreement and approving the new purchase and agreement with them. And the entity change is the same. The dates are the same, closing by August 1st of this year and a contingency date of July 1st. So that one is also moving forward towards the transfer of property and construction to begin this year.
Any questions for John? Okay. We're looking for a motion to approve Resolution 21, or 22, I apologize, and second? Second, and all in favor, say aye. Aye. That is approved. Resolution 2022-23.
And Mr. President and HEDRA, we had on the agenda item M, which is approving an assignment and assumption agreement related to NJS development. The information is not ready for tonight. We're asking that you remove this from the agenda, and we will bring this back at the June meeting. So this would be to assign the TIF agreement from formerly NJS to the new entity. So no action on that tonight, just more informational.
Okay, so next, moving on to our reports.
Thank you, Mr. President. So the first item on your reports portion of the agenda this evening is the Hastings Entrepreneurship Assessment, or that's what we're calling it. So you may remember or recall that the current building leased by the school district for the Hastings Alternative Learning Center, they've terminated or essentially given notice for that lease that'll run out late this summer. And so the city is kind of pressed with this thought of what do we do with that space going forward? HEDRA has indicated in the past a curiosity for, what could a small business incubator look like potentially in that space perhaps. And so we've brought forward kind of a plan for looking at that, and John and I started down the rabbit hole on what this could be and how, how do we do this, get a contractor, and then we realized, hey, we need to take a step back and figure out what the problem is, if there's actually a problem, what need is there in the community before we build it and hope that they will come. And so with that, we're proposing, we've put in front of you here tonight, phase 1, which we're calling Discovery. So one of those would include, meeting with the downtown building owners, getting a sense for, okay, when you've had a vacancy, has it been really hard to find a tenant? Is there a certain kind of tenant or current type of tenant that you've been seeking to have in your space that you have not been able to find in the past? So kind of do that market analysis from a commercial real estate standpoint. And then on the flip side, those tenants. So get a sense for what the entrepreneur community, whatever you want to call it, is within the Hastings community, and then figure out what their needs are. Do they even want a brick and mortar location? Do they need somewhere where they can set up shop? Do they need somewhere to make a widget, or they need somewhere to hang a sign? What do they need, again, so we can then plan, design, build something that will be most useful while still being flexible for years to come, hopefully. But identifying problems first before we set out to solve the ones that we don't know exist. So we're looking for feedback on that. We'd propose taking May, June, July, gather that information, bring that information back to HEDRA, say here's what we found. Based on what we found, then lay out a plan for then implementation to try and solve whatever it is that we may have found. Maybe we find nothing, we don't know. But at this point, it would just be staff time we're proposing, no additional budget dollars requested. With that, I'll stand for questions. Oh, and I should say, if we get there and there's nothing to be done, then kind of a different question will get asked of saying, well, okay, we still have this building, it's within the downtown property use study. Long-term, it could be redeveloped, potentially. Does HEDRA have any ideas, desires, wishes for that property? We could just rent it as is, but we'll get to that if or when we get to that. So with that, I'll stand for questions, and I do hope for questions.
Horsch?
Eric, or John, can you remind me the buildings that are going up, right, the UBC and the C word and down in Confluence, is there going to be space in those buildings for the tenants to rent to do like workspace kind of things? I can't remember.
Yeah,
what
Commissioner
the
Horsch
proposals
and
were.
the stencil project, like Isabel Flats, that won't have any live work. Seaward hasn't proposed any of those either.
Okay.
I don't believe Confluence has anything like that, but I'm looking to John to confirm.
Some office space within the Confluence building, but pretty limited, about 1,000 square feet.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so I think we'd be limited in terms of a live work situation would be art space, would be the one example currently.
Okay.
Any other questions? Commissioner Vaughn?
I think you answered it already. So during May, June, July, you just want to kind of get a feel for downtown. Are you looking for a short-term solution for that rental space? Or during May, June, and July, would you meet with the other half of that building owner? Or would that be after July to determine what their future plans are for that building?
Commissioner Vaughn, we've spoken with the owners of the other half of that building in the past. They're at some point will sell. At this point, they're not interested. When we try to put a rough timeline, they were 5+ years out. At this point, it's their kind of retirement mailbox money when they're out of town, and so it's generating income, and so they're not interested in selling at this point. Now, if somebody backed up a garbage truck full of money, maybe that would change. But at least in the short term, they're not looking to sell their portion of that building at this time. But you're spot on that at some point it will come a question of how much to invest if we invest in that, knowing that long-term, that building could be raised.
And I bring it up because I think that's a HEDRA discussion item, because to give you some guidance to go talk to folks in May, June, and July, is the discussion about having a short-term fix for a long-term development, or what if it's very successful and we then have to find a new place to move this, whatever that is. So I don't know if you need our guidance on it, but I know that the land probably has a bigger potential for a bigger development, but maybe not. I'm not a developer, so.
Commissioner Vaughn, if I, dreamt up what I'd love to see there is if, say this is in fact a need in the community, it gets built, and then there's a larger project that comes forward. They say, well, we'd love to do a commercial, but we don't know if it'll rent. We say, hey, we've got a good project already that's viable there. What the actual ownership, we'd have to look at that. But I could see that kind of being enveloped into a first floor commercial tenant space of a larger project at some point.
Any other comments for Eric?
Or if you know anybody from an entrepreneurial standpoint that you can put us in touch with, we're going to use our city communication channels to try and stir up them, but ultimately we're going to rely on word of mouth a bit on this one. We'll do what we can to get the word out, but we'll have to rely on the community as well.
Eric, is the concept you're essentially just going to put out that the city has space available and we're looking for ideas on what to do with it? Or are you going to try to, how are you going to present that? I'm trying to figure out, even through word of mouth, how do we present this to someone?
Right. I think the goal is to get out and trying to be a little bit broad in this entrepreneurial assessment. That's what we're calling it at this point of, hey, if you're out there and you're doing a business and you're kind of grinding, maybe you started with, during the pandemic, and you're trying to get to that next level, tell us about yourselves, let us learn more what's going on, and maybe this can help. Maybe it's just connecting them with Open to Business and getting some mentoring and networking and skills there. But that's really going to be like, okay, entrepreneurs, come to the city. We're not the big bad city. We're here to help, and then see what we get. At least that's what we've got thought of so far.
How big is that space?
About 4,500 square feet. The city's half, that is.
Yeah, okay.
Anything else? Thank you, Eric. So next is the business retention and expansion visits.
Mr. President, yep. So the first of two this evening, staff visited with the Hastings Golf Club. Myself and Councilmember Fox were in attendance. Those that aren't aware, they offer various events, including weddings, public restaurant, public golf. And so they drove that home that it's not just for members, it is a public restaurant, and they offer public golf. 7 full-time staff, about 40 part-time staff. I was a little surprised by that, but I suppose the summer months they need a lot of help with keeping things running. They did add 1 full-time employee in '21. They hope to add 1 to 2 more over the next 3 years. They thought the connections amongst the community, word travels, kind of an entrepreneurial thing, hopefully word travels with that as well. And then overall customer loyalty, they find that when they get a customer, it's usually a repeat customer that comes back over and over again. In terms of weaknesses, they cited good recent growth, and they hope to see that continue in the community. Certainly more people living here means more people having banquets and weddings and going golfing and going to eat. Certainly would assist their business. So those are the highlights of those. I've included the BRNA report in your packet for further information, but happy to answer any questions.
Questions? So next is the Hastings Beauty School.
Thank you. Yep. So that was myself and then Mayor Fassbender. In terms of what they offer, educational, it's a cosmetology school. They also offer services there. Very reasonable haircut, if anybody's looking for a location for a new haircut. 4 full-time staff, 3 part-time staff. They did decrease by 1 full-time employee during the pandemic, but increased their part-time staff. They said that was largely due to the fluctuating amount of the numbers of students they had enrolled in their various classes throughout the pandemic. They see a strong trend of additional students being enrolled, so they think that they'll end up employing additional employees over the next 3 years. They see a strong sense of community pride. Oftentimes, the men and women that they train out of that program end up in the community or close to the community. And then in terms of weaknesses, they said it's getting better, but overall cohesion amongst businesses and kind of rising tide raises all ships kind of an approach of trying to foster that mentality. And I'll say this was a very fun one for Mayor Fassbender, being a hairdresser herself.
Commissioner Vaughn?
Yeah, I just want to do a back pass on the last outing that you had, or the last report. One question I forgot to ask was, one of the weaknesses that the Hastings Public Golf Course said was entitlement, poor connection between city and business. Did they expand on that at all? Is that City Hall or the residents and the city and poor connection?
We talked about that a little bit. It was communication overall of, okay, what's going on? And then frankly, I think some of like somebody says one thing on Facebook typically, and all of a sudden that runs like wildfire and it wasn't quite right. And so trying to get ahead of those misnomers of information of what's getting out there that may or not be accurate at that time.
Thanks for the clarification.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Eric. Next, we have, who wants to talk about Martha's
Who wants to
position?
talk about Martha? I think everyone wants to talk about Martha. No, as you all know, Martha's had some changes in her life, and congratulations for her. Unfortunately, the connections to Hastings have dissipated, and we're seeking another person to serve in that position. So Martha has generously agreed to continue her service on HEDRA, but we will be starting an advertisement for a new HEDRA commissioner. So we will be doing more public information coming up next week to get the word out, but since you guys know better than anyone else how this functions, let me know and pass the word. And I'll have more information on the specifics next week on that, but just wanted to make you all aware of that.
Yeah, someone who's like energetic, really into, real estate stuff and has good ideas. I don't know. We'll take some ideas too, and I'll call and get some inquiries started.
Right, thank you. And then just looking at development updates, few things going on around town right now, that's for sure. Probably the one that's fun for me to watch is over at Schoolhouse Square at the Quill. I mean, they are moving very quickly through that building, talking to our building official. Everything's going great. The framing is occurring on the interior of it, some of the utility work in the interior as well. So that continues to be on schedule for potential fall opening. So we'll be seeing lots of new stuff there. Jersey Mike's has started construction along Vermillion Street, which is great to see. Bird Scooters has been open now for the last couple of weeks. I've had a couple of conversations with them. Generally, the conversation I've heard throughout the community has been very positive. We have had a couple complaints that we have followed up on, but it's been positive throughout, and considering the weather we've had so far has been less than ideal, hopefully there'll be better things to come. The thing that I found surprising about that, though, is just taking a look at the logistics, and it's not just a downtown area where the scooters are operating. They're really operating throughout the community as far as where I've been seeing them parked. But if there are any complaints about that or questions, certainly bring them to me. I can serve as the conduit on that one. One of the other things we did yesterday with all the great weather we've had is we spent about 2 or 3 hours outside with MnDOT walking Vermillion Street as part of their Vermillion Street or Highway 61 corridor project. They're going through planning right now for a major reconstruction of that corridor in a couple of years, and so we were able to walk with MnDOT staff and identify certain areas of concern in the field. And it's interesting, you drive by Vermillion Street many times, but to be able to walk it and experience it, it's a different. So that was good. They are going to be having a brief introduction at council coming up on Monday to introduce what they're doing to council and the public and giving some more information on how people can participate as we go forward in the future on that. Crossroads development at the Enclave project, 211 apartment units down near Coburn's was approved earlier this month. So that one continues to move forward. With all that development, we did interview and hire a temporary building inspector today, so that's wonderful news. So we'll be able to have more people through there to make these things occur. Eric is working again on the Makers Market alleyway project coming up for the summer, which is great. The Confluence is making good progress over there. The windows are about done. If they're not in the building, they're in process of being put in. Utility work is being completed within there. One of the most challenging things that they've been dealing with lately has been just the building being so off kilter and square. So they're doing they're doing some of their interior framing and just doing these oddities in which you're trying to plumb things and make things straight and have these odd spaces in between there. So that's been a challenge, but moving along well on that one. They will be putting out a website in the next month, I've been told. So we'll have more information there, and they'll be able to provide more of a time frame and share more public information, because I know that's been something that we've been looking forward to seeing that just hasn't been there at this time. So that's most of what's going on right now, and I can stand for questions on anything else.
Just your last comment. So have they advertised for any of the spaces yet? I mean, as far as events, I mean, it seems to me like that's got to be around the corner, right? I mean, people are planning things.
It is. I don't know specifically, Commissioner. I do know that I have received a number of inquiries that have passed on to them. Their hotel provider is also the restaurant and banquet provider as well. So that entity is presumably taking reservations. As far as how close and how far out they are at this point, I'm not sure.
Looking forward to that first event being. That's gonna
Yes.
determine a lot of things.
Absolutely, most definitely. And that's all I had for updates.
Okay. Where are we here? I think that's it. isn't it?
That would be it,
We-
Mr. President.
Okay, so we're looking for a motion to adjourn. Commissioner Sullivan and second. Commissioner Johnson, all in favor, say aye. Aye, and opposed, and that carries. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.